Hi, thanks for joining. I'm Gary Angel, and today I'm going to be doing another session drilling down into the segmentation capabilities in our DM1 people measurement platform. Segmentation is probably the most powerful feature in the whole platform. And one of the things that makes it so powerful is that you can use segments you build across any of the analytic tools in the platform. So whether you're looking at a layout view or an OLAP table or charting or funnels or day map or pathing or to from analytics, you can apply any segment you define and refine that analysis to just focus on those people. Today, what I'm going to be looking at is the segmentation builder to give you a sense of the richness and the kind of segments that can be built in the platform. So let's take a look. I'm going to start by building a segment, and I'm going to call all of my segments analytics just so I can keep them clear and delete them when I'm done. But I'm going to start by focusing on a product return segment. The distinct thing about product returners is that unlike most shoppers, when they come into the store, they don't go into any of the shopping areas. They usually go to a special area or sometimes they go to cash wrap. In this case, we're going to assume it's cash wrap because there is no specific product return area for the store. And we're going to say that this basically are people who went to cash wrap first. And they didn't just go to cash wrap first. They have to spend some time there. As you know, probably it takes some time to return a product. So what we're going to do here is we're going to pick this area. We're going to pick sections, and we're going to look for the cash wrap customer. And then we are going to look for people who first did this activity for more than a certain number of seconds. And I'm going to use 30. I'm just going to pick that offhand. I think that's a substantial amount of time to spend at the cash wrap. But basically, the key thing here is we've picked this criteria, first greater than seconds. That means that the first place that they spent more than this number of seconds in the location is the designated thing I've picked, which in this case is cash wrap and customer. I'm going to add that to the rules, and that really right there gives me a good product return segment. I don't really know what else these people may do. They may actually shop. They may come back to cash wrap. They may check out. But if they went to cash wrap first, that's a very distinct kind of store visit, and building this segment, taking advantage of the rule that allows you to focus on the first dwell or the first place they spent any specified amount of time lets you build a segment. Okay, I'm going to save this segment. I'm going to go on to number 2. Another kind of segment that you often want to build is one that hones in on a behavior like shopping a specific area or spending time in a specific area. So let's call this analytics, and the area I'm going to focus on is clearance focused. Used men's or women's clearance significantly. Okay, so one of the unusual aspects to this group is that there are really 2 different clearance sections. There's men's clearance and there's women's clearance. And I'm going to build this segment so that it captures both those people, either one, whether you shop them both or whether you shopped each one individually. Probably easier if I just type this in, and I'm going to go and pick men's clearance, and then I'm going to go and pick women's clearance. And now I'm going to use a different kind of rule. And the kind of rule I'm going to use here is I could pick either one of these. I'll talk about the advantages of each. One kind of rule is spent most time here of any. This is a great catch-all rule for saying, I want to pick people who did more of this than anything else. So I don't have to specify time. I don't have to know whether they spent 1 minute or 2 minutes or 3 minutes or 10 minutes. If this is the area they spent the most time in, they're going to qualify for the segment. The other thing I could select here is spent at least X% of all time here, and I could pick something like 50%, for instance. That means that they spent more time in clearance than pretty much anything else they did in the store, especially since we know they had to do things like enter and walkway and stuff like that. In this case, I'm just going to pick the spent most time of here, any, and I'm going to add it to the rules. So what this gives me is any shopper who spent the most part of their time in either men's clearance or women's clearance is going to become part of this segment. It's a really interesting kind of segment. And those rules that allow you to pick the most time or allow you to specify at least a percentage of time really allow you to hone in on shopper interests. Okay, so let's save this segment and we'll go on to the next one. For this next segment, I'm going to show you how you can use different mapping levels powerfully to define different kinds of segments. So here, we're going to do analytics and men's-focused shoppers. This is an apparel store. Like a lot of apparel stores, it kind of breaks down. Half the store is for men, half the store is for women. There's some areas that cross both those things. So here, men's section used most. Okay, so I've got my top segment. Heretofore, what I've been doing is looking at individual sections. I could also use department, but in fact, for this particular segment, I have a really nice one, gender, and I'm going to pick men's. So I've got all the men's areas of the store collapsed into one single unit. And now what I can say is that what I want to do is spend most time here of any. That'll get me men's versus women's. I could also specify something like, I just don't want them to be 51%. Maybe I want them to have spent the vast majority of their time here. So I'm going to say in men's, they had to spend 70% of their store time, and I'm going to add that to the rules. Okay, that's the analytics men's-focused segment. Sometimes when you define segments, you're not just interested in individual behaviors, you're interested in the order in which those behaviors occurred. And in particular, a lot of times you're interested in what happened first or what happened last. In this case, I'm going to look at people who started their shopping in Made in America section. Hoorah, right? So this is shoppers first shopping Made in America. Okay, how are we going to do this? Well, first, we're going to pick the area. This is a section, so I'm going to pick section, and I'm going to select Made in America. And now what I'm going to do is pick, once again, the first greater than seconds, just like I did with cash wrap, but now I'm using it at a section level. And here I can pick anything I want. I could have selected the definition for dwell. In this case, I'm going to pick 20 seconds here and add that to rules. Simple, right? Very similar to what we did with that first product return segment, but now we're focused in on a group of people who shopped a particular section, but it's the first place they shopped a particular section. And first shops can be really important because a lot of times they reflect the reason that the person came to the store. We call that a draw metric in the actual tool, but by building this segment, you can now look at all the other behaviors for the people who did this specific thing first. All right, now the same thing is true for what happened last. And what I'm going to do here is look at men's active, final dwell, no buy. Okay, so we don't want people who made a purchase. We want people who shopped in an area. It's the last place they shopped. They didn't shop anyplace else, and they didn't buy anything. So men's active, no buyers. How are we going to do this? Well, this time we're going to use a level called departments. Men's active is a department, so it actually groups a whole bunch of different sections together. Once again, because the mapping is so flexible, we can build our segmentations at multiple levels. I don't think I'm going to do it here, but in fact, you can actually build criteria at different levels. So some criteria can live at the section level, others can live at the gender level, and some can live at the department level. Now, the behavior we're looking for here is the last shopping thing. So I could pick last dwell if I wanted. I can pick last greater than X seconds, and I'll do that in this case. And I'll say they had to spend, no, let's just do 30 seconds just to be consistent. So I'm going to add that rule in. Okay, now you might be asking yourself, because this is non-buyers, do I need to add a rule specific to that? Well, in this case, I probably don't. I'm going to go ahead and save this segment. The reason I don't is it's pretty much impossible to check out in less than 30 seconds. If they spent more than 30 seconds, then that couldn't have been the last section that they shopped. So in a way, the segment definition works perfectly for that. But you're probably asking yourself, but what if that's not true? Let's go back in and edit this segment. Suppose that what I was looking for was people who spent a lot of time in this section. So something like, oh, maybe that's too much, but let's say 120 seconds. We'll update the rule. Now it's a problem because now someone could have gone to cash wrap after this and they might have spent less than 120 seconds there, but they might still have checked out. So what we can do, we can take advantage of one of the really cool things in the segmentation builder, which is the ability to string criteria together. So I can also say, well, and I also want to make sure that after doing this, followed by a sequence and, these people did not go to the section. And hey, look at that. I'm actually going to use a different level because I used a department, but now I'm going to use a section. And they didn't, in this case, do greater than seconds. And let's just say 20 seconds here. Okay, so my segment now is people who shopped Made in America as their last thing, that they spent more than 2 minutes there, and that they did not go to cash wrap and spend at least 20 seconds there subsequently. So now we've got people who significantly shopped Made in America and did not buy anything. That's a really cool segment and one that's super powerful for a whole bunch of different kinds of analysis. A lot of times you want to look at the people who failed, not just the people who succeeded, to understand what they did. So here what I'm going to do is build a segment of people who first went to women's and then went to men's. So analytics, women's to men's shoppers. So we're going to say shopped women's, then men's. That's a pretty distinct pattern. We're going to start with gender, and we're going to pick women's. And in this case, boy, we have a whole bunch of things we could do. We could pick dwell, we could pick seconds, we could spend most time here of any. In this case, I think what I'm probably going to do is say, where all I care about here is that they shopped women's, and I'm going to say I think I want them to have spent a good chunk of time here because this really encompasses quite a few different sections all put together into one big area. So I'm going to add that to the rules. And what I've now got is people who spent more than 2 minutes in the women's section. But that's not what my definition wants. I now want them to go followed by a sequence and I want them to shop men's. And in this case, notice that I don't have to make the criteria the same. So here I can say greater than at least and maybe say 30 seconds in this area. So now I've got a segment of people who started in women's, spent at least 2 minutes there, then went to men's and spent at least half a minute there. Keep in mind, obviously this is totally flexible in that respect, but now I've defined a segment not only forces it to look at shoppers who specifically have done multiple behaviors, but did them in a certain order within the location. Let's save this. This was my penultimate segment. My last segment is just to flip that around a little bit, because sometimes what you're interested in is people who did X but didn't do Y. So we're going to look at analytics, shop women's, not men's. So earlier we had our women and men's. Women shopper, not men's. And we're going to start off almost the same way we just did. We're going to look at gender. We're going to look at women's. We're going to say, and we're going to pick almost the same kind of thing here. Notice again, we could pick any one of these different measures, whichever one we think makes the most sense. But I'm going to just pick greater than seconds again and pick 2 minutes. In this case, I don't need a sequence and. What I'm interested in is not the order in which they did this, but I want people who did not shop men's. If they didn't shop men's, they can't have done it before and they can't have done it after. So I don't need to worry about order. What I'm going to pick here is, once again, pick gender, pick men's, get rid of that extra thing that I didn't mean to click on. And now what I'm going to do is say that they had to have spent less than X seconds. Why less than X seconds? I could have picked touched, right? Went to women's, didn't touch men's. That's dangerous, though, because if you think about it, there are things like fitting rooms that are on both sides of the store. Someone might be on the women's side of the store, but still cross over to the other side of the store for the fitting room there, just because the one on their side of the store is busy. There's also the cash wrap on that side of the store, and you might easily walk across some of the men's sections to get to the cash wrap. We have to be careful with that. So what I want here is not necessarily they didn't touch any of the men's sections, but they didn't dwell in any of the men's sections. I want to pick a pretty low threshold for that. These sections are pretty small. I could raise this, actually, as I think about it, because I'm doing the entire men's thing. I'm going to raise it just a little bit and make it 30 seconds. I'm going to save that as a rule, and then I'm going to save it as a segment. So now I've got this final segment, analytics, women shoppers who did not shop the men's section. Boy, that's a lot of rules, and we built them pretty quickly. but I hope it gives you a sense of the power of the segmentation builder and some sense of the power of segmentation to do analytics. You can really focus in on very specific behaviors in a location, and you can capture shopper or person interest in what's going on in the location with a remarkable level of fidelity. That ability to pick the place where people spent the most time, the ability to set time thresholds very flexibly and look for spent time here or spent less time here, and the ability to focus in on like where shoppers spent most or where they spent X percentage of their time. Those are all really, really powerful ways to build criteria for segmentation. I hope this was helpful. Thanks for listening.